a very important bill and very useful. And although you say yourself, and I agree with you, it's quite simple, and keeping it simple is important, because I note from the IBEC submission that they try to surround it in a lot of complexity, that this is going to be a hard thing to achieve. And it's interesting when you think back historically how the workplace has changed and how work practices have changed. Even going back to the 1800s, the employers were complaining when the trade unions tried to end the abuse of child labour in factories and sending kids up chimneys. So the employers are always going to complain about changes to working hours for workers, regardless of their age or regardless of their personal situation. And I think you've outlined it, and it's true that pushing workers into precarious if and when contracts, zero-hour contracts, really deprives them of any hope of a decent kind of life. They won't be able to get a loan. They don't know when to arrange their childcare. It can cause an enormous amount of stress. And here I would say there are some jobs that are done, and this will come up in the context of bus airing, where you do have to have what they call a spare cohort of staff, so that if somebody dies during the night or can't make it for work, that you have staff that you can rely on to fill in where essential services are needed. So it happens in ambulance driving and nursing, in transport, etc. But where this is being used is clearly in the industries that are probably the weakest in terms of union organisation, and are clearly the industries where workers are most vulnerable. So if you look at the provision of hostelry, accommodation, food service, etc., you see a very high proliferation of women who are generally not unionised or organised, and you see in the same sector, when you look at the figures, and I think you've mentioned them there yourself, a huge increase in profits between the crash in 2014, an even sharper increase in profits between 2014 and 2017, and at the same time the use of if and when and zero-hour contracts goes from 2% during the same period up by a magnificent 10% of the workforce are on these contracts. So I would say it's the same old mantra that the employers never waste a good crisis. But by arguing against your bill, Deputy, I would contend that the employers are not just saying, oh, well, we've had to deal with a crisis, but they actually want to make this a permanent feature of the workforce going forward, and are quite defensive of trying to stop any interference with it. I wonder, would you comment, please, and if you see any place in this or the future for tackling not just the if and when type contracts, but the bogus self-employed ones, the likes of Deliveroo, the companies that make out that, well, you're not an employee, but here's your hours, and you don't have hours, and you have to scrub and scrape and compete with others to do them, because I think it's something we should be taking on as well.
Thank you.